I'm John Little of OmegaShock.com, and this is the Weekend ShockCast for Saturday, April 5th, 2014. We live in dire and unsettled times, and Satan's plans are moving forward towards a final effort, a final roll of the dice before the Lord returns in glory. I do not know why Satan feels that he has a chance to win, which is why none of us can really understand why these events must play out. But God is in control, so we only need to play our part in this coming battle. This means that we must be completely prepared for what's coming. It starts with spiritual readiness, and it continues with an attempt to understand where God wants us to stand in these days. If you do not know where your assigned position is, you must ask the Lord with all your heart. Rest assured that if you truly seek to serve the Lord with all your heart, He will show you the way. Now, it's possible that God has no other assigned position than for you to get to a place of safety where you can serve those brothers and sisters in Christ who also are called to serve. After all, the cataclysm that approaches is not the Antichrist and his kingdom. What is coming is the preparation for it. The world must be brought to utter destruction so that all who are not of Christ will grab a hold of anything that offers security and a return to normalcy. Think of it as setting the stage. You and I will not be fooled by this, but we must do more than be unfooled. We must be ready and prepared for what comes after this catastrophe that is rolling down on us. You must be ready, which is why I almost always end my articles with this link. Are you ready for this? The underlying link is this one, OmegaShock.com, the shock plan for getting ready, putting it all together. That article is actually a part of a series called The Shock Plan for Getting Ready. If you think that it's perfect, follow it and pass it on to everyone you know. If you think that it needs work, give me suggestions so that I can improve it. We all must be ready for what is coming because we all have a job to do. Are you ready for this? That's a link. Do more than just think about it. So, what did we talk about this week? This week we had a much more normal mishmash of things. The Vatican was caught red-handed trying to rope in evangelical Christians. Newt Gingrich was beaten up a bit as we talked about Bohemian Grove. Venezuela issued IDs in a bone-chilling foreshadow of things to come under the Antichrist. And the conflict in Syria has shown itself to be an apocalyptic struggle that will destroy Syria, fulfill prophecy in Isaiah 17, do terrible damage to Israel, but lead to her redemption. What an interesting week. So let's get to it. On Monday, it was The Vatican is Calling. I don't think that I ever used the word bizarre in the context of anything as much as I used it last week. This alien story is so incredible, so bizarre, so, well, words fail me. And it's all a big, huge lie. Amazing. Of course, that brings to mind the words of the biggest purveyor of lies in the 20th century. Quote, "The great masses will more easily fall victim to a big lie than to a small one." Adolf Hitler. Adolf told some whoppers, but this alien story puts his all to shame, which is why it will succeed. The bigger the whopper, the more the people will buy it. But there's another purveyor of the big whopper that's calling, and she's coming to an ecumenical conference near you. Burger King fancies itself as the home of the Whopper, but there's an older organization that fits that appellation, the Vatican. She's the home of the biggest whoppers of them all, so it shouldn't surprise us that she's helping to lead the charge on the alien story. The Vatican has always gotten on board with the big lie. She supported Hitler. She was involved in the formation of the Illuminati. She's had satanic human sacrifices going on in the basement, and now she's into aliens. But there's another lie that's a little more palatable, a little quieter and gentler. It's an ecumenical lie, and it's having loads and loads of success. The Catholics have been trying to rope in the harlot daughters for ages, with varying degrees of success. She first tried force, but that didn't work so well. She then tried covert operations, and that's been quite successful. The Jesuits are an old hand at this and have judged that the time is right to move to the next stage, video calls from the Pope. Most of the semi-Christian organizations in the world have had their anti-Catholic ideas neutralized over the course of the 19th and 20th centuries. In fact, it's a rare thing to see or hear one person say anything negative about the Pope or the Vatican. With that incredible success by the Jesuit order, it was time to install a Jesuit Pope and start making phone calls. Well, about 10 days ago, Steve posted on his website a link to one particular phone call that you want to pay attention to. I've shown a link to a video, and the video itself, in which Doug Batchelor analyzes the Pope's recent threat of unity or else. Anyone who knows anything about the blood-soaked history of the Catholic Church will be transfixed by this video and the sight of an Anglican minister initiating this call by Rome to return to the arms of the Vatican. Well, it's chilling. Worse, in the above video, we see evangelical Christians embracing this message of unity by Pope Francis. Have they gone insane? No. They've gone deceived. The great deception is incoming. Are you ready for this? That's a link. Do more than just think about it. On Tuesday, it was Unmasking Newt Gingrich. I've been giving the Roman Catholic Church a hard time, and that has made some squirm a bit. And I understand that. None of us want the Roman Catholic Church to be evil, so we don't want to see evidence that her leadership is evil. So let me give the Vatican a breather and turn our sights on the Republican Party. After all, Republicans are the good guys, right? Are the Republicans supporting abortion, gay marriage, promiscuity, and the worships of Satan? Well, actually, they are. Remember that it's not what they say that matters, it's what they do, and there is one man who styles himself as a paragon of virtue when he is anything but. Newt Gingrich isn't easy to like. There's the name, there's the infidelity, there's the combative style that makes him hard to listen to, but there's something far, far worse than that. There's Bohemian Grove. I have a link and a video that talks about Newt Gingrich and Bohemian Grove, and it's titled, "Why is Newt Gingrich Afraid to Talk About Bohemian Grove?" I recommend that you watch it. If you don't know about Bohemian Grove, let's start with the sanitized version on Wikipedia. In that version, you'll see a picture with Ronald Reagan and Nixon, which is a little disturbing. Those who already know about Bohemian Grove will not be happy to see Reagan in that picture, although Nixon would not be a surprise. Looks pretty tame, doesn't it? No, it's far, far from being tame. Bohemian Grove and the membership of Bohemian Grove are the personification of evil. Here's a much more in-depth discussion on Bohemian Grove, and I have a video by Mark Dice. Earn your PhD in Bohemian Grove Studies, 1 of 2. Mark Dice makes me uncomfortable with his pugnaciousness, but he has done great research. He has really become a must-go-to source when researching the Illuminati and the global elites. I provide then a second video, which is Earn Your PhD in Bohemian Grove Studies, 2 of 2, again by Mark Dice. You can find Mark Dice's YouTube channel on Mark Dice. His website is here at www.markdice.com. And then here's a dramatically shortened version of the early Alex Jones video that helped a lot of us understand that there were dark deeds going on in Bohemian Grove. It's titled Dark Secrets Inside of Bohemian Grove, Alex Jones, and it's just a few minutes long and you should watch it. Now here's what the Bible has to say about all this. Quote, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Ephesians 6:12. The problem is that all of our leaders are showing up at Bohemian Grove. All of them. They are all participating in satanic worship, and if they aren't actively participating, they are, at a minimum, giving their allegiance. But wait. The Republicans too? They're the good guys. Sorry to burst your bubble, but they are no better than the Democrats or anyone else. I had my first taste of the Republican Party when I was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, or the CFR, just for 1 year. What I saw turned my stomach. And yes, I really was a member of the CFR for just 1 year, while everyone was denying their existence. The Council on Foreign Relations has a program where promising young graduate students would be admitted to their group for a year. They would look at them, they would consider them, and then watch their progress. Later on, they would be invited to move into their ranks as a full member if they passed. I didn't pass. But let's get back to the Republicans. I can personally tell you that they are just as psychopathic and malevolent as their Democrat rivals. They have led the charge in the attempt by the elites to build their satanic New World Order, and they cannot afford to allow their false image of purity to slip. They can't afford for us to see them as they really are, because it would spook the sheeple. So maybe this is why Newt Gingrich is afraid to talk about Bohemian Grove? He clearly is afraid to talk. He clearly does have something to hide, and we are clearly in a lot of trouble because the rot runs very, very deep. Are you ready for this? That's a link. Do more than just think about it. On Wednesday, it was They Will Control Us. Venezuela shows us how. When I start the process of preparing to write, I always start with the Drudge Report. I don't often see something to write about, but Drudge does offer a view of what is going on in the mainstream. What I talk about on OmegaShock.com is decidedly not mainstream. Today was different. Today, Venezuela rolled out something that lays the groundwork for the control of our society and the societies of the world. If you want to know what the future is, then you need to pay attention to what is happening in Venezuela. Venezuela is about to show us how it's done. I've always said that the control systems that the Antichrist will use to enslave humanity will be tested, perfected, and prototyped in the Third World. Developing countries are easier to manipulate, they are easier to bribe, they are easier to damage and destroy, and it's no big loss to the Illuminati global elites when millions of peasants suffer starvation, war, and massive death. And the global elites know that they have to perfect their strategies before rolling them out to the rest of the world, and it looks like Venezuela has been given the high honor of being chosen to show the rest of the world how it's done. Why am I saying this? Well, the Associated Press, or AP, published an article entitled, "Venezuela Issues ID Cards to Curtail Food Hoarding." To most of us, that wouldn't seem like much of a big deal. We all have ID cards of one kind or another, and Venezuela is trying to solve a difficult problem. What could be the harm? Well, let's take a look at what they're doing. To start off, Venezuelans won't be able to buy any food without this ID card, and the reason why they are doing this is to stop the black market food economy. It's also to stop the hoarding of food. Very bad people, those hoarders. It's starting out as a voluntary measure, but you can bet that everyone will eventually have an ID card, and you will not be able to buy food without it. And eventually you won't be able to buy anything without it. Worse, this new ID card seems like a very popular idea. Here is what the AP reports. Quote, registration began Tuesday at more than 100 government-run supermarkets across the country. Working-class shoppers who sometimes endure hours-long lines at government-run stores to buy groceries at steeply reduced prices are welcoming the plan. The rich people have things all hoarded away as they pull the strings, said Juan Rodriguez, who waited 2 hours to enter the government-run Abastos Bicentenario supermarket near downtown Caracas on Monday, and then waited another 3 hours to check out. Close quote. And then Rodriguez, the person interviewed above, also said this, quote, people who go shopping every day hurt us all, he said, drawing approving nods from the friends he made over the course of his afternoon, slowly snaking through the aisles with his oversized cart. Close quote. This sounds familiar. People who don't comply with the system are hurting us all. Does that rhyme with anything that you've heard recently? Yeah. As in everything that's been published by proponents of the New World Order. Now, will this work? No, it won't. Even the AP article indicates that this has been tried by Cuba. However, it will work better than in Cuba because Cuba didn't have the computer infrastructure that Venezuela has. but it still won't work. Why? Because you have to control the sellers, not just the buyers, which is what they will do after they've established this control system for buyers. Eventually, no one will be able to buy or sell without these ID cards. However, even that will have limited success, and so the control grid will press harder and harder. In the end, the power elites will be forced to use the one answer that the Bible predicted that they would use, a mark permanently attached to your forehead or your right hand, and just like the people in Venezuela, everyone will welcome it. Those who have more than their fair share are just so evil. Here's the relevant passage. Quote, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." Revelation 13:16 and 17. Now, the failure of this experiment in population control in Venezuela will teach the global elites what they need to know so that their next experiment, if they need one, will be even more of a success. Finally, when they will have perfected their recipe for complete domination of the whole earth, all it will take for them to roll it all out, well, all they'll need is the right kind of catastrophe to make it all happen. I'm prepared to bet that they've been perfecting their ability to make the right kind of catastrophe, too. The question is, how long do we have before they perfect their diabolical plans? I can't believe that we have very long at all. In fact, I suspect that we may be just one big global catastrophe away. Are you ready for this? That's a link. Do more than just think about it. On Thursday, it was Syrian civil war, proxy war, and Islamic apocalypse. What's going on in Syria is horrifying. There can be no other way of describing this. Two groups of people have deeply committed themselves to destroying each other, and caught in between are Christians and the most ancient, continuously inhabited city on earth, Damascus. It is a tragedy of vast proportion with no other possible end except utter destruction. It has already killed more than 140,000 people and displaced massive numbers of men, women, and children. When it's all over, millions will have died, the most ancient city on earth will have been destroyed, and the Middle East will have been transformed, and the world will have been changed forever. It is a tragedy of vast proportion with no other possible end except utter destruction. It has already killed more than 140,000 people and displaced massive numbers of men, women, and children. When it's all over, millions will have died, the most ancient city on earth will have been destroyed, the Middle East will have been transformed, and the world will have changed forever. I love Israel. It's my home. I speak the language. I like the people. It's beautiful. The Israeli story is full of both tragedy and hope, and most of all, it is the place that God loves above all others. I say all that because most would assume that I welcome what is happening in Syria. I emphatically do not. More importantly, I know that most Israelis do not either. Yes, it is true that Syria has vowed to kill every last Jewish man, woman, and child in Israel, and Syria has demonstrated many times a willingness to commit such atrocities. So you could say that there is justice in what is happening to Syria. You could say it, but I won't, and Israelis won't either. So as I write about what is going on in Syria, my heart is heavy at the thought of what is happening there. I also find some synchronicity in the fact that this war and my own wake-up call began almost simultaneously. The civil part of this war started in March 2011 when Syrian police tortured some kids for anti-Assad graffiti on the walls of a school in Daraa. And as the demonstrations began, I was shocked out of my complacency just days later when I stumbled over the knowledge of how dire our current situation was. But I've told that story before. Let's talk about what is happening in Syria. The Saudis would have found a way to start this war one way or another, because this really isn't a civil war. It's a proxy war funded and promoted by corrupt Persian Gulf Sunnis in an attempt to block the rising power of Iran. The U.S. is aiding the Saudis because the fate of the United States lies in the balance. If Iran succeeds in dominating the Persian Gulf, the world will no longer need U.S. dollars to buy their oil, and the debt-fueled American empire will fall. For America, it is Assad who must fall, or all is lost. This is also a proxy war for Russia in her struggle to exert influence in the Mediterranean Sea and control the flow of natural gas to Europe. Russia has an important interest in the success of the pipeline being built from Iran through Iraq and then to the Syrian coast of the Mediterranean Sea. It's also a proxy war for Iran as she struggles with Saudi Arabia for dominance. Iran sees her chance to unseat the corrupt oligarchs that control the Persian Gulf, and they want to make the way for the coming of their Islamic Messiah, the Imam Mahdi. You might say that Iran is the only country that looks at this proxy war in apocalyptic terms. Those that are fighting on the ground in Syria don't suffer from such a complex viewpoint. If this war is a civil war, it's not a civil war that has anything to do with Syria except to act as host to the conflict. No, this is a civil war within Islam, over who will usher in the Islamic last days. It's an apocalyptic civil war between Shia Islam and Sunni Islam, and only one can emerge victorious. I started to think about this a few days ago when Reuters posted an article by Mariam Karuni called "Apocalyptic Prophecies Drive Both Sides to Syrian Battle for End of Time." There's a lot in that article that will chill you to the bone, and as I search for just a few quotes from the article to illustrate the implications, I find that I almost have to quote the whole thing. So let me start with the first bit. Quote, "From the first outbreak of the crisis in the southern city of Deraa to apocalyptic forecasts of a Middle East soaked in blood, many combatants on both sides of the conflicts say its path was set 1400 years ago in the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad and his followers. Among those many thousands of sayings or hadith are accounts which refer to the confrontation of two huge Islamic armies in Syria, a great battle near Damascus, and intervention from the north and west of the country." Close quote. I am not completely sure why, where, or how Muhammad was able to make these prophecies. It could be that he was told about the biblical prophecies and twisted them for his own uses. Or demons he listened to did the twisting for him. Whatever the case, there is an uncanny resemblance to what the Bible says about the era in which we live. The Reuters article also makes something of an understatement here. Quote, "The power of those prophecies for many fighters on the ground means that the 3-year-old conflict is more deeply rooted and far tougher to resolve than a simple power struggle between President Bashar al-Assad and his rebel foes." Close quote. Far tougher to resolve does not begin to address the impossibility of rescuing the situation. Both sides are fueled by a passion to win this struggle at any cost. It is a holy war of the worst possible kind, two sides that are equally balanced and utterly fanatic. The article's author then goes on to quote a rebel fighter. Quote, "If you think all these mujahideen come from across the world to fight Assad, you're mistaken," said a Sunni Muslim jihadi who uses the name Abu Omar and fights in one of the many anti-Assad Islamist brigades in Aleppo. "They are all here, as promised by the Prophet. This is the war he promised. It is the grand battle," he told Reuters, using a word that which can be also translated as slaughter. Close quote. This is where you should start to shiver, where you should begin to feel the chill of an apocalyptic future. That concept of the grand battle is going to destroy Syria. When it's over, all that will be left is rubble to fight over. Mariam Karuni, the writer of the Reuters piece, continues, quote, "On the other side, many Shiites from Lebanon, Iraq, and Iran are drawn to the war because they believe it paves the way for the return of the Imam Mahdi, a descendant of the Prophet who vanished 1,000 years ago and who will reemerge at a time of war to establish global Islamic rule before the end of the world." According to Shiite tradition, an early sign of his return came with the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which set up an Islamic State to provide fighters for an army led by the Mahdi to wage war in Syria after sweeping through the Middle East. This Islamic revolution, based on the narratives that we have received from the Prophet and Imams, is the prelude to the appearance of the Mahdi, Iranian cleric and parliamentarian Ruhollah Hosseinian said last year. He cited comments by an 8th century Shiite imam who said another sign of the Mahdi's return would be a battle involving warriors fighting under a yellow banner, the color associated with Lebanon's pro-Assad Hezbollah militia. As Imam Sadek has stated, when the forces with yellow flags fight anti-Shiites in Damascus and Iranian forces join them, this is a prelude and a sign of the coming of His Holiness, Husseinian was quoted as saying by Fars news agency. Close quote. The comment by Ruhollah Hosseinian illustrates an important point. Islamic prophecy and the job of making it happen is government policy in Iran. Iran isn't a country like any other, which leads us to understand why Israel is so nervous about Iran's nuclear weapons program. But it also leads us to this rather rhetorical question. Is there any other possibility than complete destruction and the death of millions? I can't think of any other outcome because this conflict has become the center for global jihad. The author continues with a quote from Sami. We have here mujahideen from Russia, America, the Philippines, China, Germany, Belgium, Sudan, India, and Yemen, and other places, said Sami, a Sunni rebel fighter in northern Syria. They are here because what the Prophet said and promised, the grand battle is happening. Both sides emphasize the ultimate goal of establishing an Islamic State which will rule the world before total chaos. Close quote. Herein lies the basis for what many people see as the Islamic Antichrist, and I completely understand that. The description of the Imam Mahdi is exactly the same as the Antichrist. That's among many reasons why I don't completely discount the possibility that the Muslims will somehow achieve a kind of unprecedented victory that will allow them to dominate the world and bring in their global Antichrist caliphate. But that would require an achievement far beyond our current ability to foresee. For an Islamic Antichrist to take control, we would need to see a far greater destruction of the world than we can envision right now. Non-Islamic populations would need to collapse in a way that would reduce the world's population by far more than 50%, almost overnight, without causing the same collapse among Muslim populations. I see scenarios where this is possible, but they are as close to impossible as you can get at this time. I believe that it is far more possible for the Muslims to welcome the alien Messiah as the Mahdi, but that's a discussion for another time. Back to the Reuters article. Here's a quote from a Sunni fighter. Quote, "These hadith are what the mujahideen are guided by to come to Syria. We are fighting for this. With every passing day, we know that we are living the days that the Prophet talked about," said Musab, a fighter from the Nusra Front, a Sunni hardline group linked to Al-Qaeda speaking from Syria. Close quote. But then one from a Shiite fighter. Quote, Murtada, a 27-year-old Lebanese Shiite who regularly goes to Syria to battle against the rebels, says he is not fighting for Assad, but for the Mahdi, also known as the Imam. Close quote. And another Shiite. Quote, Abbas, a 24-year-old Iraqi Shiite fighter, said he knew he was living in the era of the Mahdi's return when the United States and Britain invaded Iraq in 2003. That was the very first sign, and then everything else followed, he told Reuters from Baghdad, where he said he was resting before heading into Syria for a fourth time. I was waiting for the day when I will fight in Syria. Thank God he chose me to be one of the Imam soldiers. Close quote. Then the Reuters article ends with a quote that spells doom for those living in Syria. Quote, Abu Hassan, a 65-year-old pensioner from South Lebanon, said he once thought the prophecies of the end of days would take centuries to come about. Things are moving fast. I never thought that I would be living the days of the Imam. Now with every passing day, I am more and more convinced that it is only a matter of a few years before he appears. Close quote. If the average Muslim sees things in this way, fighters from around the world will pour into this conflict until there is nothing left of Syria, nothing to fight over, except rubble, which is exactly what the prophet Isaiah foretold in chapter 17. Are you ready for this? That's a link. Do more than just think about it. On Friday, it was Syrian civil war, Isaiah 17. If the war in Syria was just an uprising by a people unhappy with the rule of the Assad family, this would have been over by now, and we would all sit around our coffee tables and shake our heads over how terrible the conflict was. As I said yesterday, it isn't a normal civil war or anything like the violent uprisings that we've been used to in the past. This is an apocalyptic war to the death, and there can be no winners except the global elites and, eventually, the Antichrist. But there are a few things that must happen before the Antichrist makes his awful appearance. Ezekiel 36 through 39 must be fulfilled. The Nile must run dry, and a harsh ruler must take control in Egypt. I also believe that all of this will coincide, or at least be a part of, a vast cataclysm that will convulse the world, making everyone desperate for someone, anyone, to rescue them from total disaster. But let's stick with Isaiah 17 for now. I have another website called Ezekiel36-39.com, and it's a rather in-depth study on the events surrounding the coming salvation of Israel. In that site, I discuss those chapters in the Bible that specifically deal with the salvation of Israel in the last days, the time that we're living in right now. And there can be no question that God has been planning for this moment when the people of Israel will return to Him. Those of you who say otherwise are clearly in opposition to God, and that is a very dangerous place to be. In fact, I spent a lot of time writing yet another website, IsraelOutlook.com, because it wasn't healthy for brothers and sisters in Christ to be against Israel. Truly, if you oppose Israel, you oppose God. Now, I'm not saying that Israel is all sweetness and light. They're not. They're as awful and despicable as we were before we were saved. And for some of us, that's saying a lot. For those of you who expect Israel to be any different, you're an idiot. Seriously. Why do you expect people to act like they are Christian when they aren't? What's wrong with you? Have you lost your mind? Remember that God promised to save Israel after they return to the land, not before, which is spoken of in Ezekiel 36, verses 24 to 27. So you anti-Zionist types need to get a life. Really, read your Bible and get a grip on yourself. God is not happy with you, and that is a dangerous place to be. But let's get back to Syria. I have a shockingly bad memory. I never can remember what I wrote, who I wrote it to, or why. I don't remember names, numbers, or dates, and I'm impossible at answering email. Really. So when I sat down to write this article, I wasn't sure if I'd said anything previously about Isaiah 17 on my Ezekiel Tetrad website, also known as Ezekiel36-39.com. I'm glad to say I did find something, and it is interesting to see how my perception of events in Syria had changed. However, not much has changed, which is why the original article is still pretty good. And that's why I'm going to give it to you here with a couple additional comments in bold square brackets. Unfortunately, adding the older article pushes this one to over 2,100 words, so all of this is going to be a bit long. Sorry. Again, this was written over a year and a half ago. A friend of mine called me up from the Netherlands a few days ago. We talked about what we were up to and mutual friends that were still in Israel. Then we stumbled onto the subject of eschatology, and I said that the next big thing that's going to happen is Gog and Magog and the salvation of Israel. No, it's not, he responded. I was taken aback. Here I was, incredibly knowledgeable about Israel and the Bible and eschatology, and this Dutch person dares to disagree? Why? I growled menacingly. Damascus has yet to be destroyed, he replied, blissfully ignorant of how close he was from being rhetorically torn limb from limb. I sat and blinked for a moment. I remembered reading something in the Bible about Damascus being destroyed, but I thought that it already happened. and that the prophecy didn't apply to the future. I sputtered a bit in deflated indignation before flitting through the scriptures that referred to Damascus. Sure enough, it needed to be destroyed. Once that was clear, I did a quick search of the history of Damascus and found that it had never been destroyed, at least as far as we could tell. That is an incredibly serious problem. Why? Well, if Damascus has never been completely destroyed, then it is going to be completely destroyed in the very near future. There's not a whole lot of future left in our future, if you know what I mean. But there's worse. It appears that a lot of Israelis are killed also. A lot of Israelis. In fact, I can see how this fits with Zechariah 13 when it speaks about the same time frame. Quote, "And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith Jehovah, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the 3rd part shall be left therein." Zechariah 13, verse 8. If there is anyone out there that can prove that all of this has already happened and that there is going to be no massacre of Israelis in the future, well, my joy would be boundless. Really, I'm not kidding. However, until someone can prove that Isaiah 17 and Zechariah 13:8 have already been fulfilled, I live in dread of the future. But let's start working through the terrible predictions of Isaiah 17. Quote, "The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. The cities of Aroer are forsaken. They shall be for flocks which lie down, and none shall make them afraid. And the fortress shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus. And the remnant of Syria, they shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith Jehovah of hosts. And it shall come to pass in that day that the glory of Jacob shall be made thin, and the fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. And it shall be as when the harvestman gathereth the standing grain, and his arm reapeth the ears. Yea, it shall be as when one gleaneth ears in the valley of Rephaim. Yet there shall be left therein gleanings, as the shakings of an olive tree, 2 or 3 berries in the top of the uppermost bough, 4 or 5 in the outmost branches of a fruitful tree, saith Jehovah, the God of Israel." Close quote. That was Isaiah 17, verses 1 through 6. This is the utter destruction, an utter destruction that has never happened, except possibly during the Assyrian conflict. However, it is my understanding that Damascus was not made a ruinous heap by the Assyrians, and that they left much of it intact as a city. It was certainly a city when Alexander the Great was rampaging through the Middle East, so as I said before, it does not appear that Damascus has ever been utterly destroyed. But if Damascus is to be utterly destroyed, who destroys it? Who destroys Damascus? Israel? Does the Assad regime use chemical weapons against Damascus? Does Gog and Magog do this? What does it mean when verse 4 says, "The glory of Jacob shall be made thin, and the fatness of his flesh shall wax lean"? This sounds like Israelis being killed, lots and lots of Israelis being killed, and that is beyond disturbing. It's horrifying. Unless someone can prove to me beyond the shadow of a doubt that all of this has happened already and that there is no possibility that this will happen in the future, I will live in dread of the near future. This could even happen before the beginning of this year, 2012. And of course, this article was written, again, a year and a half ago. To continue on in verses 7 through 9, quote, "In that day shall men look unto their Maker, and their eyes shall have respect to the Holy One of Israel. And they shall not look to the altars, the work of their hands, neither shall they have respect to that which their fingers have made, either the Asherim or the sun images. In that day shall their strong cities be as the forsaken places in the wood and on the mountain top, which were forsaken from before the children of Israel, and it shall be a desolation." Close quote. Isaiah 17, verses 7 through 9. To me, this confirms my understanding that this is in our future because the Assyrian captivity did not result in Israel looking to God. Furthermore, do you remember these verses in Ezekiel 38? Quote, "Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, it shall come to pass in that day, that things shall come into thy mind, and thou shalt devise an evil device. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell securely, all of them, dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates. To take the spoil, and to take the prey, to turn thy hand against the waste places that are now inhabited, and against the people that are gathered out of the nations that have gotten cattle and goods that dwell in the middle of the earth." Close quote. Ezekiel 38, verses 10 through 12. Both verse Isaiah 17:9 and Ezekiel 38:10 through 12 indicate that Israel will be rendered defenseless. Could it be that Israel will be forced to use nuclear weapons against Syria after suffering horrific civilian casualties? And that the terrible devastation in both Israel and Syria will cause the world to demilitarize the whole area? Which would explain why Gog and Magog say that Israel is a country of unwalled villages. My own addition here at this time is there is another possibility that an economic catastrophe could render Israel unable to maintain her military, or there could be an EMP attack on Israel. But let's move on. But there is a very, very important and positive development in Isaiah 17:7. Quote, "In that day shall men look unto their Maker, and their eyes shall have respect to the Holy One of Israel." Close quote. Almost any amount of horror is worthwhile if it ends in redemption, but you will forgive me if I do not look forward to seeing people that I care deeply about suffering and dying. To continue on in Isaiah 17, in verse 10, "For thou hast forgotten the God of thy salvation, and hast not been mindful of the rock of thy strength. Therefore thou plantest pleasant plants, and settest it with strange slips. In the day of thy planting thou hedgest it in, and in the morning thou makest thy seed to blossom. But the harvest fleeth away in the day of grief and of desperate sorrow. Ah, the uproar of many peoples that roar like the roaring of the seas, and the rushing of nations that rush like the rushing of mighty waters. The nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters, but he shall rebuke them, and they shall flee far off, and shall be chased as the chaff of the mountains before the wind, and like the whirling dust before the storm. At eventide behold terror, and before the morning they are not. This is the portion of them that despoil us, and the lot of them that rob us." Close quote. Isaiah 17, verses 10 through 14. Both verses 13 and 14 sound like Gog and Magog. Again, if anyone can prove to me that I have the wrong interpretation of Isaiah 17, I would be truly grateful. Truly. Over a year and a half later, and I would still be grateful if someone could conclusively prove that Israel will not suffer great trouble and great loss of life. At the same time, remember that Gog and Magog will be a time when God does the following. Quote, "And I will send a fire on Magog and among them that dwell carelessly in the isles, and they shall know that I am the Lord." Ezekiel 39:6. That sounds a lot like a massive solar flare and CME that will destroy the electrical and electronic infrastructure throughout a large part of the developed world. Are you ready for this? That's a link. Do more than just think about it. This has been the Weekend ShockCast for Saturday, April 5th, 2014. I'm John Little from Megashock.com. Have a great weekend.